I never imagined I would be the daughter who locked her parents and sister out of a five-star hotel in the middle of a blizzard, standing behind thick glass with a glass of wine. I watched them pound on the door while their keycards flash a desperate red. When my sister shoved me and shattered my grandmother's watch, my parents laughed. That is when I decided to buy the only thing I never chose before: my freedom. My name is Quinn Allen, and standing here in the silence of the Snowfall Crown Resort lobby, I realized that silence costs exactly $41,000. That was the grand total running through my head, a receipt printed in invisible ink against the back of my eyelids. The automatic glass doors of the resort were locked. I had ensured that myself only moments ago. From where I stood, the world was divided into two distinct, irreconcilable realities. My reality was wrapped in the scent of burning cedar logs, expensive leather, and the subtle, fruity notes of the Pinot Noir resting in my hand. The air in here was climate-controlled to a perfect 72 degrees, underscored by the soft, almost imperceptible hum of a heating system designed to make you forget that winter existed. Their reality, just 3 inches of reinforced glass away, was very different. My parents and my younger sister, Lila, stood clustered together on the other side of the entrance. The Jackson Hole night had turned vicious. The wind was howling, a sound I could hear faintly even through the heavy insulation of the hotel walls. It whipped around the stone columns of the portico, driving the snow horizontally so that it plastered against their expensive, brand-new coats. I watched as my father huddled into his collar, his breath puffing out in white, ragged clouds that were instantly torn away by the gale. He looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe he just looked like what he actually was, stripped of the pedestal I had spent a decade building for him. I took a slow sip of wine and let the liquid settle on my tongue. In my mind, the calculator was still running. The flight tickets had been $8,000, the private car service, another $600, the pre-booked excursions, the dining reservations, the lift passes. It all added up, but the bulk of it, the heavy anchor that was currently dragging them down, was the accommodation. 3 nights at the Snowfall Crown, specifically, the Summit Suite for me, and 2 deluxe Alpine rooms for them. The total for the rooms alone came to more than $27,000. I had paid it. The charge was sitting on my American Express card right now, a pending transaction that represented more money than most people made in 6 months. But I had paid for empty rooms. I had paid for the right to hold the only working key card in my hand, while theirs had been deactivated before they even touched the elevator button. My left wrist throbbed, a sharp, rhythmic pulse of pain that synced with my heartbeat. I looked down at it. The skin was beginning to bruise, blooming into an ugly shade of violet, but I hardly noticed the injury to my flesh. My eyes were fixed on the watch strapped there. It was a vintage Jaeger LeCoultre, a piece that had belonged to my grandmother, Eleanor. It was the only thing I owned that felt like it had a soul. The crystal face was shattered. A spiderweb of white cracks obscured the dial, radiating out from the center where the impact had been hardest. Beneath the fractured glass, the delicate gold hands were frozen. They had stopped dead at 4:19. That was the time of death, not of a person, but of an era. 4:19 was the exact moment my sister shoved me into a stone pillar, and the moment my parents decided it was funny. Outside, Lila slammed her open palm against the glass. The sound was a dull thud, muted and pathetic. Her mouth was moving violently. I did not need to hear her to know what she was screaming. I could read the shape of the words on her perfectly glossed lips. "You are crazy, open the door! Quinn, you are insane!" She looked deranged. The wind had torn her carefully styled hair from its pins, whipping strands across her face, sticking to her lip gloss. She was furious, not because she was cold, but because she was losing control. Beside her, my father was gesticulating wildly, his face red with a mix of cold and rage. He was yelling something about me being ungrateful, a word he had used as a weapon since I was 12 years old. But it was my mother who drew my attention. She was shivering, her shoulders hunched up to her ears, but her hands were steady. She was holding her phone up, The camera lens pointed directly at me through the glass. I could see the glow of the screen reflecting off her glasses. She was recording, even now, freezing in sub-zero temperatures, stranded in a blizzard. Her instinct was not to apologize or to beg for help. Her instinct was to document the tragedy for her audience. She was already crafting the narrative, framing me as the villainous, unstable daughter who abandoned her elderly parents in a storm. I stared right into the lens of her phone. I did not blink. I raised my wine glass slightly, a toast to her performance. A young man working the reception desk, whose name tag read David, was pretending to sort through a stack of papers. He had seen everything. He had seen the shove, the fall, the laughter, and the subsequent transaction where I paid for everything and barred them from entry. He kept his head down, offering me the professional courtesy of invisibility. In a place like this, you paid for discretion as much as you paid for the thread count of the sheets. I set my wine glass down on a high marble table. The cold radiating from the window was starting to seep through the glass, just enough to chill the tips of my fingers. "Open the door," Lila mouthed again, her eyes wide with panic. I reached out and took hold of the heavy velvet curtain that lined the entryway. It was thick, lush fabric, the color of dried blood. I did not feel angry. That was the surprise. I expected rage, fiery and consuming, but what I felt was a profound, icy clarity. I felt like a surgeon who had finally decided to cut out a tumor that had been feeding on the host for too long. "I have paid for these empty rooms," I thought, the words echoing in the silence of my mind. "I paid for them with 10 years of my life. I paid for them every time I signed a check to cover a mortgage that was not mine. I paid for them every time I canceled a date, a vacation, or a doctor's appointment because Lila needed new camera equipment or Dad needed to pay off a gambling debt. They called me the Bank of Allen. It started as a joke, but jokes have a way of hardening into expectations. I had become a walking wallet, a mechanism for solving problems I did not create, but standing there, watching the snow accumulate on my mother's expensive blowout. I realized the currency had changed. I was done paying with money. I was done paying with my dignity. I pulled the curtain. The heavy fabric slid along the track with a smooth, satisfying swish. It eclipsed them. 1 second, they were there. Contorted faces, screaming mouths, flashing screens, and the next, they were gone. Just a wall of dark red velvet. The lobby was quiet again. The fire crackled in the hearth across the room. I looked down at my wrist one last time. The shattered watch face stared back, 4:19. That was when the old promise died, I whispered to the empty room. And my new rules began. To understand why I could stand there, calm and dry, while my own flesh and blood froze on the other side of that wall, you cannot just look at the invoice for the hotel room. You cannot just look at the bruise on my arm. You have to look at the ledger I had been keeping in my head for a decade. You have to go back to where the cold really started. I closed my eyes, and the sound of the wind outside the hotel seemed to change pitch. The howling gale of Wyoming softened, transforming into a rhythmic drumming. The biting chill of the lobby glass faded, replaced by a humid, oppressive heat. When I opened my eyes in my memory, the snow on the hotel window was melting. It ran down the glass in long, weeping rivulets, dissolving the white frost until it wasn't snow at all. It was rain. It was the rare, heavy monsoon rain hammering against the thin single-pane window of a stucco house in the middle of the Arizona desert. I was back in Phoenix. I was 17 years old, and I was already tired. Growing up in the suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, meant living in a perpetual state of dehydration and blinding light. The heat there was not just weather, it was a physical weight that pressed down on the roof of our stucco house, warping the blinds and bleaching the color out of the plastic lawn chairs. But inside the Allen household, the atmosphere was heavy for a different reason. I was born 5 years before Lila, but the gap felt more like a generation. By the time I was 10, I had stopped being a child and had become what my mother affectionately called the little adult. It was a title that sounded like praise but felt like a yoke. Being the little adult meant I knew how to reset the circuit breaker when the air conditioning overloaded. It meant I knew which days the trash needed to go out and how to balance the checkbook when my father forgot to record a withdrawal. Lila, on the other hand, was the princess. She was delicate. She was artistic. She was the one who needed to be protected from the harsh realities of utility bills and dirty dishes because her hands were meant for greater things. I remember the specific texture of my disappointment the night of my 8th grade guitar recital. I had practiced for 6 months, callousing my fingertips until they were hard and numb. Mastering a complex classical piece that my teacher said was advanced for my age. I stood on the stage of the school auditorium, the spotlight burning against my retinas, searching the dark rows of seats for my parents. I saw the empty chairs in the 3rd row where I had told them to sit. They never came. When I got home, guitar case heavy in my hand, I found them in the living room. Lila was crying because she had placed 2nd instead of 1st in a local dance competition. My mother was rubbing Lila's back, cooing soft words of affirmation, while my father ordered pizza to cheer her up. When I asked why they missed my performance, my mother looked at me with genuine confusion, as if I were speaking a foreign language. Lila needed us. "Quinn?" she said, her voice laced with a subtle accusation that I was being selfish. She was devastated about the silver medal. "We knew you would be fine. You are always fine. You are the strong one." That was the refrain of my youth. You are the strong one. It was not a compliment. It was an excuse to neglect me. The theft that hurt the most happened the summer I turned 16. I had spent a year working weekends at a local diner, bussing tables and scrubbing grease traps, saving every single dollar in a glass jar hidden inside my hollowed-out biology textbook. I had $1,200 saved. It was enough for a spot at a prestigious summer technology camp in Silicon Valley. It was my escape hatch. It was my first step toward a life that did not involve sweating in Arizona. 2 days before the deadline, I went to the jar. It was empty. My stomach dropped so hard I felt nauseous. I marched into the kitchen, shaking, holding the empty jar. My father did not even look up from his newspaper. My mother sighed, putting down her coffee mug with a look of practiced patience. "We had to borrow it. Honey," she said, "Lila has a chance to go to the Nationals for her dance team in Orlando. The costumes alone are $500. We could not let her miss this opportunity. She has real potential." I stood there, gasping for air, feeling the hot tears prick my eyes. I asked when they were going to pay me back. I asked about my camp. My father finally looked at me then. His eyes were hard. "Do not be petty. Quinn, we are a family. We help each other. You can learn computers anywhere. Lila needs this stage. You are tougher than she is. You can handle the disappointment. She cannot." I learned computers from library books instead. Lila went to Orlando, placed 12th, and lost her costume at the airport. They never paid me back. The only person who saw the cracks in my armor was my grandmother, Eleanor. She lived in a small assisted living apartment that smelled of peppermint and old paper. She was the only one who ever asked me if I was tired. She was the only one who didn't look at me and see a utility. On my 18th birthday, just before I left for college in Denver, she called me to her side. Her hands were shaking as she pulled a velvet box from her bedside drawer. Inside was the Jaeger-LeCoultre watch. The leather strap was worn, and the gold casing had tiny scratches that told the story of a long life, but it ticked with a steady, reassuring heartbeat. "You are the only one in this house who knows the value of time." "Quinn," she whispered, fastening it around my wrist. Her skin was paper thin against mine. "But listen to me carefully. Do not let them bind you with it. This watch is for you to tell your own time, not to track theirs." I nodded, but I did not truly understand. I was too young, too desperate for approval. When Eleanor was dying a year later, I flew back from Denver, skipping my final exams to sit by her bed. My parents and Lila were in the cafeteria, eating sandwiches, complaining about the hospital parking fees. I held Eleanor's hand as her breathing turned shallow. She opened her eyes one last time and looked right at me. Her gaze was fierce, lucid in a way that frightened me. You have the right to choose peace, she rasped. Her grip tightened on my fingers. Do not let guilt be a leash. I thought she was telling me to take care of them. I thought she was passing the torch of responsibility to me. I thought she meant that my peace would come from knowing I had done my duty by the family. I rewrote her final blessing into a life sentence of servitude. After I graduated and started making real money as a junior analyst, the dynamic shifted from emotional neglect to financial predation. It was subtle at first. A call from my dad about a transmission repair he could not quite cover until his next paycheck. A text from my mom about an electric bill that was higher than expected because of the heat wave. Can you help us out? Just a little? They would ask. The phrase just a little is the most dangerous measuring unit in the world. Just a little turned into $400 here, $800 there. Just a little became a monthly line item in my budget. I was living in a studio apartment in Denver, eating instant noodles so I could send money home to people who were living in a 4-bedroom house. While I was climbing the corporate ladder, working 80-hour weeks, Lila was chasing stardom. My parents were convinced she was one viral video away from being the next big celebrity. They indulged her every whim. She needed professional lighting equipment. She needed dance classes with celebrity choreographers. She needed the newest iPhone because the camera quality was essential for her brand. They never asked where the money came from. They just assumed it existed, like water from a tap. I remember the day the nickname stuck. I had just transferred $2,000 to cover their property tax, which they had somehow forgotten to save for. In the family group chat, my mother sent a procession of heart emojis and wrote, "Thank goodness for the Bank of Allen. What would we do without our steady rock?" It was meant to be a joke. Lila reacted with a laughing emoji. My father sent a thumbs up. I stared at my phone screen in my office, feeling a cold hollowness in my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to type that I was not a bank, that I was their daughter, that I was 24 years old and tired of carrying 3 able-bodied adults on my back. But I typed, "Happy to help. Love you guys." I did it because I was terrified. I was terrified that if I stopped paying, they would stop loving me. I believed that my value to them was entirely transactional. If the check stopped clearing, I would just be the boring, ungrateful daughter who missed the guitar recital. I told myself that when they got older, they would appreciate it. I told myself I was being a good daughter. I told myself that sacrifice was the highest form of love. I wore the watch Eleanor gave me every single day. I looked at it 100 times a day, but I never saw the warning she had given me. I only saw the time ticking away, time I was selling to buy their affection. The tragedy wasn't that they were using me. The tragedy was that I handed them the shovel and thanked them for digging the hole. Eleanor never asked me to save them. She told me to save myself, but standing in the rain of my own insecurities, I forged every link of the chain that bound me to them, locked it around my own neck, and swallowed the key. It would take 10 years and $41,000 to finally cough it back up. Fast forward to the present day in Seattle, where the rain is not a tragedy, but an aesthetic feature of the architecture. I am 34 years old. I am the co-founder and CEO of Marrowlight Analytics, a boutique cybersecurity firm that specializes in shielding healthcare startups and fintech companies from data breaches. In the glass-walled conference rooms of the Pacific Northwest, I am known as a predator of vulnerabilities. I hunt down weaknesses in code and patch them before the world falls apart. I have been featured on tech podcasts, interviewed by major business journals, and invited to speak at conferences where tickets cost more than my father's first car. To the world, I am a woman made of steel and algorithms. I am efficient, ruthless, and terrifyingly competent. To my family, however, I am none of those things. To them, I am just Quinn the Killjoy. I am the cold one. I am the one who is obsessed with money, which is a rich accusation coming from the 3 people who consume my income with the voracious appetite of termites in a wooden house. My life is a study in schizophrenia. By day, I negotiate contracts worth millions of dollars. By night, I manage the pettiest, most humiliating expenses of 3 adults who refuse to grow up. Let me break down the ledger for you. It is not a metaphor. It is a literal list of monthly outgoing transfers that I review with the same scrutiny I apply to a forensic audit. I pay the rent for the 2-bedroom condo my parents live in just outside of Seattle. I moved them up here 2 years ago because they claimed Arizona was too hard on my father's health, though I suspect they just wanted to be closer to my wallet. I pay for a climate-controlled storage unit that houses Lila's props. She calls them PR packages and essential set design elements. In reality, it is a 10 by 10 room filled with cardboard boxes of fast fashion and ring lights she used once. I pay for the premium health insurance plan for all 3 of them, because my father refuses to navigate the state marketplace, and my mother insists she needs a plan that covers her preferred naturopath. I even paid the penalty fees on my father's taxes last year, because he forgot to file for 3 years running. The total monthly cost of keeping the Allen family afloat is roughly equivalent to the annual salary of a mid-level software engineer. And yet, the credit never lands on my doorstep. Take my mother's 60th birthday last month. I wanted it to be special. I booked a private table at the Pink Door, one of the hardest reservations to get in the city. I arranged for a custom menu. I prepaid for the wine pairing. I left work early, ignoring a crisis with a client server, just to be there on time to greet them. Lila arrived 40 minutes late. She breezed in wearing a dress that cost $600, which I suspect she bought with the emergency credit card I gave her for car repairs, and immediately started rearranging the table setting to get better lighting for a photo. When the dinner ended and the waiter brought the bill, I didn't even look at it. I simply slid my black card into the folder. It was a reflex. My mother looked around the restaurant, her eyes misty with performative gratitude. She reached out and squeezed Lila's hand. "Oh, Lila, honey," she said, her voice trembling. "Thank you so much for choosing this place. It is so elegant. You always have such exquisite taste. I feel so special." Lila didn't correct her. She didn't say that she had never heard of the restaurant until I sent her the calendar invite. She didn't say that she hadn't paid a dime. She just smiled that practiced, camera-ready smile and said, "Anything for you. Mom, you deserve the best." I sat there, the receipt burning a hole in the leather folder under my hand, and said nothing. I signed the slip. I added a 25% tip. I walked them to their Uber, which I also ordered, and went home alone. The watch on my wrist felt heavier that night. For years, I had worn grandmother Eleanor's Jaeger LeCoultre as a talisman. It was supposed to be my shield, a reminder that I had the power to choose my own time. But somewhere along the line, the symbolism had warped. It was no longer a symbol of my independence. It was a reminder of the time I was losing. It was a shackle made of gold and leather, ticking away the seconds of a life that was being cannibalized by the people I was supposed to love. But I had a mechanism for dealing with this. It was a mantra I repeated to myself in the mirror every morning while I brushed my teeth. "I can afford it," I would tell myself. "They do not understand how money works, but I do. It does not hurt me to pay. It would hurt them not to." It was a lie. Of course, it didn't hurt my bank account, but it was rotting my soul. I was buying their love, and the price was inflating with every passing quarter. Lila was the worst offender. As her follower count on Instagram stagnated in the low thousands, her desperation for content grew expensive. She started pitching me ideas for what she called content trips. "I need to go to Malibu," she told me over FaceTime, her face covered in a sheet mask. "There is this Airbnb that everyone is shooting at. If I get pictures there, brands will take me seriously. It is an investment. Quinn, think of it as seed funding." Then it was Miami for Swim Week. Then it was New Orleans for Mardi Gras. "You will be tagged as a sponsor," she would say, as if her 2,000 followers were a demographic I needed to target for high-end data security services. "The brand exposure will be great for you." I paid for Malibu, I paid for Miami, I paid for New Orleans, and in return, I got nothing, not even a tag. When I asked her about it once, she rolled her eyes and said, "I could not tag you." "Quinn, it ruins the aesthetic of the post to tag a corporate account. You just do not get how the algorithm works." My parents, meanwhile, had become Lila's dedicated PR team. They spent their days glued to their iPads, sharing her reels and stories to every distant cousin and neighbor they could find. They talked about her with a breathless reverence, calling her their little star. When they spoke of me to their friends, the tone shifted. I was the busy one. "Oh, Quinn? We hardly see her," my father would say with a sigh, playing the victim of a neglectful child. "She is always working, very corporate. She has no time for family." He would say this while sitting on the leather sofa I bought, watching the 60-inch television I paid for in the apartment I rented. The cognitive dissonance was breathtaking. They had successfully categorized my financial support as a natural resource, something that just existed in the environment, while my physical absence was a moral failing. The breaking point was approaching, though I didn't see it coming. I thought I could sustain this indefinitely. I thought I was strong enough to carry them forever. It was a Tuesday evening in late November. I was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window of my corner office, watching the Seattle rain streak against the glass. The city lights were blurring into streaks of gold and gray. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a notification from my legal team. The contract with the hospital network in Chicago had just been signed. It was a deal worth $8 million over 3 years. It was the kind of money that changed the trajectory of a company. It was the kind of money that cemented my status as a major player in the industry. I stared at the number on the screen. $8 million. A normal person would have thought about buying a house in the San Juan Islands. A normal person would have thought about early retirement. My first thought was, now I can finally take them on that big trip they have been complaining about. Now I can buy Lila a studio so she stops filming in the living room. Now I can secure their retirement fund so I do not have to worry about them when they are 70. I looked at my reflection in the dark glass. I looked tired. I looked successful and wealthy and utterly drained. I tapped the screen, dismissing the notification. I thought the money was going to be the tool I used to save them one last time. I had no idea that in less than a month, I would be using that very same wealth to sever the limb to save the body. I didn't know that the $8 million wasn't for their future. It was the purchase price for my own life. The idea for the trip was born out of a moment of sentimental weakness, the kind that usually strikes late at night when you are scrolling through old family photos and forgetting how miserable the reality of those moments actually was. My parents were approaching their 36th wedding anniversary. It is not a round number. It is not a milestone that typically demands a grand gesture, but I was looking at their graying hair and the way my father walked with a slight limp, and I felt that familiar suffocating wave of guilt. I wanted to give them something beautiful. I wanted to give them a white winter, the kind you see in movies, the kind that rich families enjoy in throwaway commercials for luxury cars. I decided on Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I decided on the Snowfall Crown Resort. I wanted to give them a once-in-a-lifetime experience where, for a few days, they could pretend they were the royalty they always believed they should be. I should have known that my generosity would be immediately weaponized against me. Before I had even booked the flights, the narrative had been hijacked. I heard my mother on the phone with my aunt, her voice pitched high with that boastful, sugary tone she used when she wanted to make other people jealous. "Oh yes, we are going to Jackson Hole," she chirped. Lila insisted. "You know how she is. She told Quinn that we all needed a break, and she convinced her sister to make it happen. Lila has such a vision for these things. She is treating it as a big content project." I stood in the hallway, holding a basket of laundry I was doing for them, and felt my jaw tighten. In my mother's version of reality, I was merely the wallet, the silent mechanism that executed Lila's brilliant creative vision. Lila was even worse. She posted a story on her Instagram that afternoon. It was a selfie of her winking, with a caption that read, "So excited to take the fam on a luxury winter getaway. Work perks are the best perks. Stay tuned for the snowy aesthetics. Influencer, life. Travel blessed." She didn't mention me. She didn't mention that the work perk was actually her sister's hard-earned bonus from a grueling cybersecurity contract. To her 2,000 followers, she was the benefactor. She was the successful one. I swallowed my pride. I told myself it didn't matter who got the credit. As long as they had a good time, I buried myself in the logistics. This is what I do. I am a CEO. I manage complex systems. I treated this vacation like a military operation or a corporate merger. I booked 4 seats in business class on Alaska Airlines. I secured the Summit Suite for myself and 2 deluxe Alpine rooms for them, ensuring they had the mountain view they would inevitably complain about if they didn't get. I spent 3 nights researching restaurants, cross-referencing Michelin guides with Yelp reviews to find places that were expensive enough to impress them, but accessible enough for my father's palate. I booked a private sleigh ride. I booked a spa afternoon. I booked a guided snowmobile tour. I compiled all of this into a detailed Excel spreadsheet. It had tabs for the itinerary, the weather forecast, packing lists, and reservation confirmation numbers. I color-coded the activities. I sent the file to our family group chat with a note. Here is the plan. Please look it over and let me know if you want any changes before I finalize the deposits. The message was marked as read by everyone. No one replied. 3 days later, Lila finally messaged the group. She didn't mention the schedule or the restaurants. She asked, "Does my room have a bathtub near the window? I need natural light for a skincare collab." Then my mother chimed in. "Quinn, make sure the hotel has that hot stone massage I like. And does the room have a balcony? Your father wants to smoke his cigars." Not a single person asked me what I wanted to do. Not a single person asked if I needed a break. Not a single person asked if the flight times worked with my meeting schedule. I was the travel agent, the concierge, and the financier. My preferences were irrelevant because, in their eyes, my function was to serve. The real knife in the gut came during the pre-trip dinner. We were eating at a steakhouse in downtown Seattle. A week before our departure, I was paying, naturally. My father was cutting into a ribeye that cost $80, and my mother was swirling a glass of Cabernet. They were talking about Europe. Specifically, they were talking about my cousin, who had just been taken to Italy by her husband. It looked so romantic. My mother sighed, showing my father a photo on her phone. Rome, Florence, Venice, that is how you celebrate an anniversary. My father chewed his steak slowly, wiped his mouth with the linen napkin, and then looked at me. He didn't look at me with gratitude for the $40,000 trip I was about to take them on. He looked at me with disappointment. "You know," he said, gesturing with his fork, "if Lila had your kind of money, she would have taken us to Europe years ago. Lila has a big heart. She understands how to enjoy life. You, Quinn, you are safe. You are practical." He said practical like it was a slur. Lila would have done it big. My mother agreed, nodding sagely. "It is a shame. She has the spirit of a millionaire, but the bank account of an artist, and you have the bank account of a millionaire, but the spirit of an accountant." The table went quiet. I sat there, feeling the blood drain from my face. I was taking them to one of the most exclusive resorts in North America. I was spending a fortune. And they were sitting there, eating my food, fantasizing about how much better my sister would treat them if she had the money that I was currently spending on them. I didn't scream. I didn't flip the table. I just took a sip of water and smiled a thin, brittle smile. "Well," I said, my voice steady, "maybe one day she will be able to treat you to Paris. Until then, you have Jackson Hole." They missed the sarcasm. They just nodded, as if agreeing that it was a tragedy they had to settle for a 5-star American resort. 2 days before the flight, my phone started buzzing with notifications from American Express. I had given each of them a supplementary card years ago for emergencies only. That was the rule. Flat tires, urgent care visits, a lost phone. The notifications were not for emergencies. Authorization. Successful, Montclair, Seattle, $2,400. Authorization successful, Nordstrom, $850. Authorization successful, Canada Goose, $1,200. Authorization successful, Toomey Luggage, $1,600. I sat in my office chair, staring at the glowing screen. They were shopping. They were gearing up for the trip using my money, buying designer coats and luxury suitcases to look the part of the wealthy family they pretended to be. Lila was buying ski outfits. My mother was buying new luggage because her old Samsonite wasn't photogenic enough. My father was buying a parka that cost more than my first car. I opened the banking app. The supplementary limit on the cards was $5,000 each. They were hitting the ceiling. The bar at the top of the screen turned from green to orange, then to red. I hovered my thumb over the freeze card button. It would have been so easy. I could have stopped it right there. I could have called them and screamed that they were thieves. I could have canceled the trip. But a cold, dark curiosity took over me. I wanted to see how far they would go. I wanted to see if there was a bottom to their entitlement. I wanted to know, once and for all, if there was any limit to what they would take from me without saying thank you. I felt like a scientist observing a lab experiment that had gone horribly wrong. I needed the data set to be complete. I tapped the screen. I did not hit freeze. I hit increase limit. I raised the cap on all 3 cards to $10,000. A little banner flashed across the top of the screen. Update successful. Go ahead, I thought, staring at the words. Buy the coats. Buy the bags. Look the part. Because this is the last time. This is the last withdrawal you will ever make from the Bank of Allen. I decided then and there that this trip was not a vacation. It was a test. It was a final exam for my family. If they could get through these 4 days with a shred of decency, if they could show me one moment of genuine gratitude, one moment where they treated me like a daughter and a sister instead of a walking ATM, then maybe I would keep the bridge intact. But if they failed, if they treated me like a servant in the snow, then I would burn the bridge while we were still standing on it. I closed the app and turned my phone face down on the desk. I thought I had set the parameters of the test. I thought I would have until we reached the hotel to make my assessment. I was wrong. The test didn't start in Wyoming. The failure didn't wait for the resort. The answer to my question would come much sooner than I expected. It would come at 30,000 feet, somewhere over the Rocky Mountains, before our boots even touched the snow. The cabin of the flight from Seattle to Jackson Hole smelled like warm nuts and expensive cologne. It was the specific, hermetically sealed scent of first class, a fragrance designed to make you feel like you had already arrived before the plane even left the tarmac. The seats were upholstered in supple leather that crunched softly when you shifted your weight, and the ambient lighting was a calming, golden hue. It should have been the moment I finally exhaled. It should have been the start of the relaxation I had paid nearly $8,000 to secure. Instead, my chest felt like it was being crushed by a hydraulic press. We had barely settled into our seats, Lila and Mom in row 2, Dad and I in row 3, when the performance began. Lila did not even wait for the seatbelt sign to flick on. She whipped out her phone, attached a small ring light to the top, and angled it so the frame captured the spacious legroom and the snowy peaks visible through the window. "Hey guys," she chirped, her voice pitched up an octave into her influencer persona. "Welcome back to my channel." So, huge news. I have been working on this surprise for months, and I finally managed to treat my fam to the ultimate luxury winter getaway. We are heading to a secret 5-star location. Stay tuned because this trip is entirely thanks to my content creation work. Hard work pays off. Babies. I sat perfectly still in the seat behind her. My hands were folded in my lap. I was not just a ghost in her narrative. I was the financier who had been edited out of the credits. She was lying to thousands of strangers without a tremor in her voice, claiming ownership of a reality I had built with my own sweat and sleepless nights. A flight attendant moved down the aisle with a silver tray of pre-departure beverages. "Champagne?" she asked, offering a crystal flute with a smile. I reached for it. I needed the alcohol. I needed something to dull the sharp edges of my irritation. My fingers had just brushed the stem of the glass when a hand shot out from the row in front of me. Lila snatched the glass away from the attendant before I could secure it. "No. Quinn, stop," she said loudly. Her voice cut through the quiet hum of the cabin. "You know how you get. You drink one sip, and your face turns bright red. It is splotchy and ugly. I need to get some B-roll of the toast. And I cannot have you looking like a tomato in the background. It ruins the aesthetic." She didn't look at me. She looked at the phone screen, checking her angles. She held the glass, my glass, up to the light, swirling the bubbles for the camera. "Just let me hold it," she added, dismissing me with a wave of her hand. "It looks better with my manicure anyway." I froze. The flight attendant looked at me, her eyes wide, waiting for me to object, waiting for me to say, "Give me back my drink." But I just lowered my hand. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, not from alcohol, but from a humiliation so acute it felt like a sunburn. I was 34 years old, a CEO, and I was being scolded and censored by my younger sister because my physical reaction to alcohol did not fit her color palette. "I will just have water. Thank you," I said to the attendant. My voice sounded hollow. The plane took off, banking hard over the gray expanse of the Puget Sound before turning east toward the mountains. The seatbelt sign pinged off. That was the cue for the second act. Lila stood up, reached into her carry-on bag, the Toomey bag I had paid for, and pulled out a flat box wrapped in silver paper. She leaned over the aisle to hand it to Mom. "Happy early anniversary. Mommy," she cooed. "I saw this and just knew it was you." Mom unwrapped the box with theatrical slowness. When she lifted the lid, she gasped. It was a scarf, but not just a scarf. It was pure cashmere, a deep, rich burgundy that looked impossibly soft. "Oh, Lila," Mom breathed, pressing the fabric to her cheek. She turned to Dad, her eyes shining. "Look at this. Elliot, it is exquisite. It feels like a cloud." She looked at Lila with a gaze so full of adoration it made my stomach turn. "You always know," she said. "You always know exactly what I love. It is so thoughtful." Then, she turned slightly in her seat to look back at me. Her expression shifted. It wasn't angry, exactly. It was pitying. It was the look you give to a child who doesn't quite understand how to be human. "You know, Quinn," she said, her voice dropping to a stage whisper that was meant to be heard. "This is what I mean. You are very generous with the big things. Sure, you pay the bills. But Lila, she has the heart. You just throw money at problems. But you never buy anything with a soul. Money without a heart is just paper. Honey." The words hung in the pressurized air between us. Money without a heart. My phone buzzed against my thigh. I pulled it out of my pocket, shielding the screen from Dad, who was busy admiring the scarf. It was a notification from American Express. A transaction had just cleared on the supplementary card ending in 4021, Lila's card. Authorization successful. Nordstrom, $350. Item category, luxury accessories. I stared at the screen. I looked at the burgundy scarf draped around my mother's neck. I looked at the timestamp. The transaction had happened yesterday afternoon, 2 hours after I raised the credit limit. Lila hadn't bought that gift. She had used my money to buy a gift for our mother, presented it as her own, and then sat there basking in the praise while Mom used the moment to insult me for being cold. It was a perfect, closed loop of theft and emotional abuse. Lila had stolen the credit for the trip, stolen my champagne, stolen my money to buy the gift, and stolen the affection of our mother, all in the span of 40 minutes. I felt a light touch on my shoulder. I looked up. It was the flight attendant again. Her name tag read Alana. She was crouching in the aisle, her face level with mine so that her voice wouldn't carry to the row in front. "I saw what happened with the wine," she whispered. Her eyes were kind, but there was a hardness in them, a recognition of something unjust. "And I heard what your mother said." I opened my mouth to defend them, to say it was just a family dynamic, but the words died in my throat. "I have a very nice Pinot Noir in the galley," Alana said softly, "and I have some chocolate truffles that we usually save for the Million Miler members. If you want to come back and stretch your legs, there is a jump seat with your name on it. No cameras allowed." The kindness of a stranger is a dangerous thing when you are holding yourself together with duct tape. It almost broke me. Here was a woman who had known me for an hour, treating me with more dignity than the people who had known me for a lifetime. I forced a smile. "Thank you," I whispered. I think I just need to close my eyes for a bit." Alana nodded. She understood. She placed a fresh bottle of water on my tray table, gave my arm a quick, supportive squeeze, and walked away. I reached into my bag and pulled out my noise-canceling headphones. They were large, over-ear ones that blocked out the world. I put them on and didn't play any music. I just turned on the active noise cancellation. The hiss of the air vents vanished. The sound of Lila's voice narrating her skincare routine to her phone vanished. The sound of Mom and Dad cooing over the softness of the stolen cashmere vanished. I turned my head to the window. Beneath us, the clouds were a solid floor of white, broken only by the jagged, dark teeth of the Rocky Mountains poking through. I realized then that I wasn't going on vacation. I wasn't going to a family celebration. I was flying toward a demolition site. My right hand drifted to my left wrist. My fingers traced the cool, smooth glass of the Jaeger-LeCoultre watch. I rubbed my thumb over the crystal face. It was pristine. There wasn't a scratch on it. The gold was warm against my skin. Tick, tick, tick. It was the only sound I could hear inside the silence of the headphones. It felt like a countdown. I didn't know it yet, but this was the last hour that this watch would be whole. It was the last hour that the family would be whole. We were suspended in the sky, hurtling at 500 miles per hour toward the moment where everything would shatter. I looked at the clouds and felt a strange, cold resolve settle over me. I was done hoping they would change. I was done waiting for the thank you that was never coming. Let them have the scarf, I thought. Let them have the champagne. Let them have the lie. Because when we landed, the bill was going to come due, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to be the one picking up the tab. The cold in Jackson Hole does not ask for permission. It kicks down the door. When we stepped off the plane onto the tarmac, the air temperature was 12 degrees below zero. It was a physical assault. The wind coming off the Teton Range didn't just chill the skin. It felt like it was trying to crystallize the moisture in my lungs. My breath plumed out in a thick, white cloud that vanished instantly into the gray sky. We walked toward the terminal, a beautiful structure of timber and stone that looked more like a hunting lodge than an airport. Around us, other passengers were bustling with the frantic energy of vacationers, their voices muffled by scarves and the hum of the idling jet engines. Lila, however, stopped dead in the middle of the walkway. With her teeth chattering and her nose turning a bright, alarmist pink, she whipped out her phone. "Snow content!" she screamed over the roar of the wind. She spun in a circle, holding the device high to capture the mountains, the plane, and her own shivering face. "Guys, look at this. We have touched down in Winter Wonderland." She blocked the path of a businessman in a heavy wool coat, who had to swerve around her with a scowl. My father laughed, clapping his gloved hands together as if she were a toddler taking her first steps. My mother was busy adjusting the stolen cashmere scarf, making sure the label was visible for anyone who might be looking. I walked past them. I kept my head down, clutching my carry-on bag, feeling less like a family member and more like the hired logistics manager who had unfortunately been caught in the frame. I had paid $8,000 for the flights, yet I felt like a background extra in the movie of Lila's life. Inside the terminal, the air was thick with the scent of pine wood, expensive coffee, and damp wool. A massive stone fireplace roared in the center of the baggage claim area, crackling with heat that barely reached the edges of the room. The carousel began to turn, a serpentine belt of rubber delivering ski bags and designer suitcases to the waiting crowd. I stood by the pillar, watching for the Toomey luggage I had purchased. Lila was standing 10 feet away, but her voice carried perfectly. "I hope the props survived," she was saying to Mom, her voice shrill with anxiety. "If that ring light is broken, the whole trip is ruined. I need to film the room tour the second we get there. The lighting is only good for another 2 hours." I felt a headache blooming behind my eyes. It was a sharp, rhythmic thumping that synced with the rotation of the baggage carousel. I needed 5 minutes. I needed 5 minutes where no one was asking me for a credit card, where no one was blocking traffic for a selfie, and where I didn't have to watch my parents fawn over the sister who treated them like props. "I am going to the ladies' room," I told my father, who was staring intently at the carousel. He didn't look at me. He just waved a hand vaguely in my direction. "Grab the big bag if it comes out. Quinn, my back is acting up." Of course, his back was acting up. The same back that had been fine enough to carry Lila's camera equipment through the terminal in Seattle. I turned and walked away, heading toward the restrooms tucked behind a wall of rough-hewn slate. The bathroom was empty, or at least it seemed to be. It was a sanctuary of warm, amber lighting and cream-colored marble. The air smelled of lemon verbena and silence. I dropped my heavy tote bag on the counter and leaned over the sink. I turned the faucet on cold. I let the icy water run over my wrists, shocking my system, trying to freeze the anger that was simmering in my gut. I looked at myself in the mirror. My skin looked pale. There were dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. I looked like a woman who had been running a marathon for 10 years without a finish line. Then, the silence broke. From the handicap stall at the far end of the row, a voice echoed off the marble tiles. It was a voice I knew better than my own. "No, listen to me. I have the location secured." It was Lila. She wasn't whispering. She was speaking with the confident, brash tone she used when she was negotiating, or what she thought was negotiating. I froze. My hands were still under the water, but I didn't feel the cold anymore. I reached out and turned the faucet off slowly, eliminating the sound of the rushing water. Lila continued, unaware that her audience had arrived. "I already told you. The suite is insane," she said. "It is the Summit Suite at the Snowfall Crown. Yes, the one with the freestanding granite tub right in front of the window. The view is straight onto the mountain. It is literally a $5,000 a night backdrop." She paused, listening to whoever was on the other end. I stood paralyzed. The Summit Suite. That was my room. I had booked the deluxe rooms for them. Beautiful rooms, expensive rooms, but I had booked the Summit Suite for myself. It was the one thing I had kept, the one boundary I had drawn. "Yeah, I can get the shots done by Monday," Lila said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial purr. $2,000 for the set, plus the product trade? Done. Send the contract. I will do the unboxing on the bed and then the lingerie shots in the tub. It is going to be viral. My stomach dropped. She was selling access to my room. She had entered into a contract with a lingerie brand to shoot content in a suite she didn't pay for, didn't book, and didn't have a key to. She had sold the privacy I hadn't even enjoyed yet. There was another pause, and then Lila laughed. It was a harsh, dismissive sound. "Don't worry about her," she said. She was talking about me. I knew it instantly. "Quinn, please, she doesn't have a creative bone in her body. She wouldn't know what to do with that light if it hit her in the face. She is just going to sit in there and check emails. It is a waste of a suite on her. I am doing the hotel a favor by actually showcasing it." I gripped the edge of the marble counter. My knuckles turned white. It wasn't just the theft of the room. It was the contempt. She viewed me as a utility, a non-entity who existed solely to facilitate her brilliance. In her mind, the suite belonged to her because she was the only one who mattered. The person on the other end must have asked how she planned to get me to swap rooms, because Lila's answer came fast and practiced. "Oh, that is the easy part," she said breezily. "I just get Mom and Dad to work on her. I will tell them I need the room for my career, that this is my big break. They will give her the guilt trip about supporting my dreams. Quinn always caves. She has this hero complex. She needs to feel like she is saving the family. I just push that button, and she hands over the keys. It works every time." It works every time. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed to disintegrate. The daughter was gone. The sister was gone. All that was left was the mechanic they called when the engine of their lives needed oil. I had spent my life thinking I was the strong one. I thought I was the bedrock of the family. But listening to my sister dissect my psychology in a public toilet, I realized I wasn't the bedrock. I was the mark. I was the victim of a long con that relied on my own desperate need for validation. They knew. They knew exactly how to manipulate me. They didn't love me for my help. They laughed at me for my willingness to give it. I heard the lock on the stall door click. I didn't move. I didn't pretend to be fixing my hair. I didn't reach for a paper towel. I just stood there, my hands gripping the counter, watching the stall door swing open in the reflection of the mirror. Lila stepped out. She was holding her phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. She looked up and saw me. For a split second, her face faltered. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a flash of genuine fear. Her eyes darted to my face, then to the quiet room, calculating how much I had heard. "Oh," she said, her voice tight. "Quinn, I didn't know you were in here." She slipped the phone into her pocket, her mask sliding back into place. She forced a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "How long have you been there?" I turned slowly to face her. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a coldness in my chest that matched the temperature outside on the tarmac. It was the absolute zero of emotional detachment. "Long enough," I said. My voice was flat. It gave nothing away. Lila searched my face. She was looking for the anger she could dismiss, or the hurt she could manipulate, but I gave her neither. I gave her a blank wall. She shifted her weight, clearly unsettled, but then her natural entitlement kicked in. She decided to gamble that I was the same Quinn I had always been. The Quinn who avoided conflict. The Quinn who forgave. "Well," she said with a shrug, pulling out a tube of lip gloss, "the bags should be out by now. Dad is probably panicking. We should go." She stepped up to the mirror next to me, applied a layer of gloss, and smacked her lips. She met my eyes in the glass one last time. "Don't be weird. Quinn," she said lightly, "we are on vacation." She turned and walked out, the door swinging shut behind her. I stayed for another moment. I watched the door settle into its frame. "Don't be weird," she had said. I looked down at my watch. The crystal was still intact, but I knew its time was running out. I picked up my bag. It felt lighter now, not because the contents had changed, but because I had dropped something heavy in that bathroom. I had dropped the illusion that these people were my family. They were not my family. They were my overhead, and I was about to liquidate the asset. I walked out of the bathroom and back into the terminal. I saw them standing by the carousel. My father was pointing at a black suitcase, gesturing for a stranger to move out of his way. My mother was fixing Lila's hair. They looked like a unit, a tight, impenetrable circle of three. I walked toward them, my heels clicking rhythmically on the polished floor. I wasn't walking to join them. I was walking to end them. The lobby of the Snowfall Crown Resort was designed to make you feel small in the presence of money. It was a cathedral of timber and glass, with a ceiling that soared 40 feet high and a chandelier made of actual antlers and crystal that must have weighed as much as a small car. A massive stone fireplace dominated the center of the room, burning logs the size of tree trunks, and the air smelled of pine needles and expensive leather polish. In the corner, a pianist in a tuxedo was playing a soft, melancholic version of a Debussy piece. It was perfect. It was the exact scene I had paid for. It was beautiful, serene, and completely at odds with the ugliness that walked in through the revolving doors with me. My family stepped into the warmth, shaking the snow from their coats. Lila immediately pulled out her phone, doing a 360-degree pan of the room, gasping loudly for her audience. My father puffed out his chest, looking around with a proprietary air, as if he were the one who had made this possible. "Welcome to the Crown," a deep voice said. I looked up to see a man approaching us. He was tall, with silver hair and a suit that cost more than my first year of college tuition. This was Mr. Morgan, the general manager. I had exchanged several emails with him during the booking process to ensure everything was perfect. He walked past my father without breaking stride. He walked past my mother. He stopped directly in front of me and extended his hand. "Ms. Allen," he said warmly, "it is a pleasure to finally welcome you in person. Thank you for choosing the Snowfall Crown for such a special occasion. We have everything prepared exactly as you requested." My father's hand, which had been half raised for a handshake, dropped awkwardly to his side. I saw a flicker of annoyance cross his face. He was used to being the patriarch, the man in charge, even if he hadn't paid a dime. To have another man bypass him to address his daughter was a breach of the hierarchy he had invented. "Thank you, Mr. Morgan," I said, shaking his hand. The grip was firm and professional. It was the handshake of one business person acknowledging another. "Please, come to the desk," he said, gesturing with an open palm. "We have the keys ready so you can avoid the check-in queue." We followed him to a private section of the marble counter. There, arranged neatly on a velvet mat, was a leather folder containing 4 key cards. Mr. Morgan opened it. The cards were labeled clearly in elegant gold font. 2 said Alpine Deluxe, 1 said Standard Guest, and the last one, the one in the center, said Summit Suite. I reached out to take the folder. I had the distribution planned in my head. The deluxe rooms were for Lila and my parents, spacious, luxurious rooms with fireplaces and balconies. The standard key was an extra access card, and the Summit Suite was mine. It was the sanctuary I had purchased for myself, the one place where I could close the door and be Quinn, not the bank. But I never got to pick them up. Before my fingers could touch the leather, a hand shot out from my right. It was Lila. Reflexively, she snatched the key card labeled Summit Suite. It was as if she had been trained to spot the most expensive item in the room and claim it before anyone else could react. "Okay, perfect," she said, clutching the card to her chest. "This one is mine. I need the lighting in the Summit for the lingerie contract. The bathroom there has the freestanding tub, right?" She turned to Mr. Morgan, flashing him a dazzling smile. "Mr. Morgan looked confused. He looked at me, then back at Lila. "Actually, Miss, the Summit Suite is reserved for Ms. Quinn Allen," he said politely. "The other rooms are—" Lila cut him off with a laugh. She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, it does not matter whose name is on the computer," she said. "It is all family. Quinn knows I need this room. It is for work." She turned to walk away, assuming the conversation was over. She assumed that, like always, I would just stand there and let her take the best piece of the pie because it was easier than fighting. But I was not the same person who had landed in Jackson Hole. I was the person who had heard her in the bathroom. I was the person who knew she had sold access to my room before we even arrived. I reached out and grabbed the edge of the key card she was holding. "No," I said. The word was quiet, but it dropped into the circle of my family like a stone into a frozen lake. Lila stopped. She looked down at my hand gripping the card, then up at my face. Her expression was one of genuine shock. "Excuse me?" she said. I looked her dead in the eye. "That suite is mine," I said. My voice was steady. "I paid for it. I booked it. It is my room. You have a deluxe room. It is beautiful. It has a balcony. It is more than enough for your video." For a second, there was silence. The pianist kept playing. The fire kept crackling. And then, the vacuum sealed. My mother stepped forward, her face twisting into a scowl. "Quinn, really?" she hissed. "Do not start this now. You are going to make a scene. Lila has a contract. She has a deadline. Why do you have to be so selfish?" "Selfish?" I repeated, feeling a bitter laugh rising in my throat. "I just spent $40,000 to bring you here, and I am selfish because I want to sleep in the room I paid for? You do not need that much space." "Quinn," my father barked, his voice rising loud enough to turn heads in the lobby. "You are not going to use the tub. You are not going to take pictures. You are just going to sit there and read your emails. Why do you need a suite to do that? Give the card to your sister. She is actually working." Lila, sensing the tide was turning in her favor, pulled on the card. "Let go." "Quinn," she said, her voice turning nasty, "you are sabotaging my career on purpose. You are just jealous because I have a brand and you are nobody." She tugged. I held firm. We were standing in the middle of a 5-star hotel lobby, 2 grown women playing tug-of-war with a piece of plastic. It was humiliating. I could feel the eyes of the staff on us. I could see Mr. Morgan stepping forward, his hand raised to intervene, but he was too slow. Lila grabbed the strap of my handbag with her free hand, trying to torque her body to rip the card from my grip. Let go, I said, the Vietnamese phrase from my grandmother slipping out in my anger. Let go! You are hurting me, Lila screamed, though I hadn't touched her. She yanked the bag hard. I stumbled. My boot slipped on the polished marble floor. We were standing near one of the massive stone columns that supported the vaulted ceiling. Then, Lila did something that wasn't an accident. She saw me lose my footing, and instead of letting go, instead of steadying me, she shoved. It was a sharp, calculated push against my left shoulder. She released the bag at the same moment, using the momentum to throw me backward. My feet went out from under me. I fell hard. I flailed my arms, trying to catch myself, but there was nothing to grab. My left arm swung out and connected with the rough, jagged stone of the column. Crack! The sound was sickening. It wasn't the sound of bone breaking. Though the pain that shot up my arm was blinding, it was the sound of glass meeting stone at high velocity. I hit the floor with a thud that knocked the wind out of me. I lay there for a second, staring up at the antler chandelier, gasping for air. My wrist was on fire. Slowly, I pushed myself up. I looked at my left hand. The vintage Jaeger LeCoultre was destroyed. The crystal face was not just cracked, it was pulverized. Shards of glass glinted on the marble floor like diamond dust. The gold casing was dented deep on the side. The delicate hands, which had ticked faithfully since 1950, were bent and frozen. They had stopped at 4:19. I stared at the watch. My brain couldn't process the pain in my wrist because it was too busy processing the death of the object. This was Eleanor. This was the only person who had ever loved me without conditions. This was the symbol of my patience, my endurance, my promise to be the bigger person. And it was gone, shattered by the sister I had spent a lifetime protecting. I expected silence. I expected a gasp. I expected my mother to rush forward and ask if I was okay. I expected my father to yell at Lila. Instead, I heard a sound that turned my blood to ice. Lila laughed. It was a nervous laugh at first, but it grew louder. She stood over me, clutching the key card she had successfully wrestled away. "Oh my God. Quinn, get up," she said, rolling her eyes. "You are such a drama queen. I barely touched you. Look at you, flopping around on the floor like a fish." I looked at my mother. She was looking down at me, but not with concern. She was looking around the lobby to see who was watching. "Get up." "Quinn," she whispered harshly, "you are making a spectacle. It is just an old watch. We can buy a battery for it later. Do not ruin the mood." Just an old watch. My father just shook his head, looking disgusted. "Look at this mess," he muttered. "Cannot take you anywhere without some kind of problem." I sat there on the cold stone floor. The pain in my wrist was throbbing, a deep, red rhythm. But inside my chest, the frantic beating of my heart had stopped. The anxiety was gone. The guilt was gone. The desperate need to please them, to fix this, to make them happy. It had all vanished. It was replaced by a silence so profound, it felt like the vacuum of space. I looked at the shards of glass on the floor. I looked at the time frozen at 4:19. "You have the right to choose peace," Eleanor had said. I finally understood what she meant. Peace wasn't about keeping the family together. Peace was about removing the thing that was breaking me. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply reached out and picked up the largest piece of the shattered crystal. I held it in my palm. It was sharp enough to cut, but I squeezed it just tight enough to feel the edge. I stood up. I brushed the dust off my coat. I looked at Lila, who was still smirking. I looked at my parents, who were already turning away, dismissing my pain as an inconvenience. Enough, I thought. The word rang in my head like a gavel coming down. I looked at Mr. Morgan. He was standing there, his face pale, his eyes wide with horror. He had seen the shove. He had seen the laugh. He knew exactly what had just happened. I took a breath. It was the first breath of my new life. The world did not stop spinning when I hit the floor, but the social contract of the Snowfall Crown Resort certainly did. Before I could even attempt to push myself up again, Mr. Morgan was at my side. He moved with the swift, silent efficiency of a man who had spent 30 years managing disasters for the ultra-wealthy. He did not help me up immediately. Instead, he knelt on one knee, placing himself as a physical barrier between me and my family. Two men in dark suits, the hotel security detail, materialized from the shadows of the colonnade. They did not speak. They simply positioned themselves in a V formation, blocking Lila's path. "Ms. Allen, Mr. Morgan said. His voice was low and calm, pitched perfectly to cut through the ringing in my ears. "Do not move too quickly. Are you dizzy? Is there pain in your head or neck?" I blinked. I looked past his shoulder. Lila was standing there with the keycard still clutched in her hand, but her smirk was faltering. My mother was nervously smoothing the front of her coat, refusing to look at the security guards. My father was blustering, his face turning a mottled red. "She is fine," my father announced loudly. He took a step forward, but the larger of the two security guards shifted his weight, effectively walling him off. "It was just a little slip. She is clumsy. Quinn, tell them you are fine so we can go to the rooms." Mr. Morgan did not turn his head. He did not acknowledge that my father had spoken. He kept his eyes locked on mine. "We saw the impact. Ms. Allen," he said to me, "the floor is marble over concrete. We need to be certain." "I am okay," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. It was not the voice of the daughter. It was the voice of the CEO. It was cold. It was detached. "My wrist hurts, but my head is fine." I allowed him to help me stand. The movement sent a fresh jolt of agony up my left arm, radiating from the point where the watch had been crushed against the stone. I cradled my wrist against my chest. Mr. Morgan leaned in closer. He lowered his voice so that only I could hear him. "Ms. Allen," he said, "I want you to know that we have 4 ultra-high-definition cameras covering this specific sector of the lobby." He raised a finger discreetly, pointing toward the antler chandelier and the hidden recesses of the timber beams. "We have the entire incident recorded in 4K resolution," he continued. "The assault, the fall, the theft of the keycard. If you wish, I can have this footage pulled, time-stamped, and placed in the hotel safe immediately. It will be available for law enforcement or your legal counsel whenever you require it." The words hung in the air. Law enforcement, legal counsel. Lila heard him. She had been stepping forward to try and reclaim the narrative, to tell the security guards that we were just sisters playing around. But the word lawyer acted like a physical blow. Her face went slack. The color drained out of her cheeks, leaving her contour makeup looking stark and artificial. She looked at the ceiling, searching for the black glass eyes of the cameras. She realized in that second that there were no filters on a security feed. There was no editing. There was no caption she could write that would change the fact that she had just shoved her sister into a stone pillar in a fit of greed. But she did not apologize. That was the thing that finally killed the last ember of hope in my chest. Even with the threat of legal action hanging over her head, her instinct was self-preservation, not remorse. "Quinn, do not be ridiculous," Lila stammered. Her voice was higher than usual, brittle with panic. "You are not going to call a lawyer over a little push. We are family. Do not be a psycho." I looked down at the floor. The security guard had stepped back to allow me to retrieve my property. I knelt down and picked up the remains of the Jaeger LeCoultre. The leather strap was torn. The mechanism was shattered. I held the broken pieces in my good hand. The sharp edges of the crystal dug into my palm. My grandmother had told me I had the right to choose peace. For 10 years. I thought peace meant keeping the water calm. I thought peace meant swallowing the insults so there wouldn't be a fight. I thought peace meant paying the bills so they wouldn't stress. I looked at the frozen hands of the watch, or 19. I realized I had been wrong. Peace was not about endurance. Peace was not about silence. Peace was a surgical procedure. It was the act of cutting out the infection so the rest of the body could survive. I stood up. I closed my fingers around the broken watch. "Mr. Morgan," I said. My voice was clear. It carried across the lobby. "Please secure the footage. Do not delete it. My attorney will contact you if I decide to press charges." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother gasped. It was a theatrical sound, a hand flying to her mouth. My father looked as if I had slapped him. "Press charges?" my father sputtered. "Against your sister? Have you lost your mind? You are blowing this completely out of proportion. It was an accident. She slipped." "She did not slip," I said. I did not look at him. I looked at the fireplace. "She barely touched you," Lila screamed. She was vibrating with rage now, the fear turning into aggression. "You are just trying to ruin my trip because you are jealous. You are trying to make me look bad. Go ahead and show the video. Everyone knows I'm the sweet one. Everyone knows you are the cold, unfeeling bitch who hates fun. They will believe me." I turned my head slowly to look at them. I looked at my father, red-faced and indignant. I looked at my mother, performing shock. I looked at Lila, convinced that her Instagram followers constituted a jury of peers that superseded the law. I did not say a word to them. I did not argue. I did not explain. I did not tell them how much the watch meant to me. I simply turned my back. It was a physical motion, but it felt like a spiritual one. I pivoted on my heel, presenting my back to them, and faced Mr. Morgan. "Mr. Morgan," I said, "I would like to discuss my reservation at the desk, privately." "Certainly. Ms. Allen?" he replied. I walked away. I heard my mother calling my name. I heard my father shouting for me to come back and stop being disrespectful. I heard Lila crying, a loud, jagged sound that I knew was fake, because I had seen her practice it in the mirror 1,000 times. I did not stop walking. I walked across the plush carpet, past the grand piano, past the roaring fire, to the heavy oak reception desk at the far end of the room. Mr. Morgan walked beside me, matching my pace. When we reached the desk, he moved behind it and typed something into his terminal. He looked up at me, his expression grave. "Ms. Allen," he said, "I want to clarify something. The reservation for all 3 rooms, the Summit Suite and the 2 Alpine Deluxe rooms, is entirely in your name. The credit card on file for all incidentals and room charges is your American Express Centurion." "Yes," I said. He nodded. "Legally, you are the sole primary guest. Your family members are listed as accompanying guests. This means that, strictly speaking, they have no contractual standing with the hotel. You hold the rights to the rooms. You hold the rights to access." I stared at the computer screen on the desk. I saw the numbers. $27,000 for the rooms. $41,000 total for the trip. For a decade, I had been the victim. I had been the one who was used, the one who was drained, the one who was pushed around. I had handed them the power because I was afraid of losing them. But standing there, with my broken watch in my pocket and the sound of their entitlement echoing in the lobby behind me, I realized something fundamental. I was the one with the black card. I was the one with the contract. I was the one who had signed on the dotted line. They were not my masters. They were my guests, and guests can be evicted. A cold, dark idea began to form in my mind. It was not a flash of anger. It was a calculation. It was the kind of strategic maneuver I used in boardrooms to dismantle hostile takeovers. I looked at Mr. Morgan. "Mr. Morgan?" I asked. My voice was quiet, steady, and terrifyingly polite. Hypothetically, if I were to pay for all the rooms in full right now, does that mean I own the use of them for the next 3 nights? "Mr. Morgan tilted his head slightly. "Yes, Ms. Allen, if the bill is settled, the inventory belongs to you for the duration of the stay." And, I continued, "if the inventory belongs to me, do I have the right to decide who enters those rooms?" Mr. Morgan paused. He looked at me, and I saw a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He didn't smile, but his posture straightened. He understood exactly what I was asking. "Yes, Ms. Allen," he said, "as the primary reservation holder, you have absolute discretion over the distribution of key cards. You determine who has access to the suite and the adjoining rooms. If you do not wish for a guest to have access, We cannot grant it to them without your explicit permission. I looked back toward the entrance. My family was still there. Lila was arguing with the security guard, waving her phone around, probably trying to record him. My parents were huddled together, looking at the reception desk with a mixture of confusion and arrogance, waiting for me to fix the mess and hand them their keys. They thought this was a negotiation. They thought I was over here cooling off, and that in 5 minutes I would come back with my head down, apologize for causing a scene, and give them what they wanted. They had no idea that I wasn't cooling off. I was freezing over. I looked back at Mr. Morgan. I reached into my purse and pulled out my wallet. I extracted the heavy black metal card. I placed it on the marble counter. It made a solid, heavy sound. Clink. Charge it all. I said, everything. The rooms, the taxes, the resort fees. Charge the full amount for the entire stay right now. Mr. Morgan picked up the card. He didn't hesitate. And the keys? He asked softly. I looked at the folder with the 4 key cards. The one for the Summit Suite. The 2 for the deluxe rooms. The spare. I want you to issue 1 active key, I said. Just 1. For the Summit Suite. For me. Mr. Morgan's fingers hovered over the keyboard. And the other keys? For your family? I looked at the snow swirling outside the massive windows. It was a blizzard out there. It was dark. It was cold. Give them the cards. I said, put them in the folder. Make it look official. But I want you to deactivate them. I want those cards to be nothing but plastic scrap. I want the rooms to remain empty. Mr. Morgan looked at me for a long moment. He was a professional. He had seen everything. But even he looked a little stunned by the magnitude of what I was doing. I wasn't just kicking them out. I was letting them believe they had won, right up until the moment they walked into the wall. Are you sure, Ms. Allen? He asked. It is -12 degrees outside. If they cannot get into their rooms, they will have nowhere to go. The hotel is fully booked. There are no other vacancies in the valley tonight due to the storm. I touched the bruise on my wrist. I thought about the scarf. I thought about the bathroom stall. I thought about the laugh. I am sure, I said. Mr. Morgan nodded. He swiped the card. I watched the receipt print. It was a long strip of paper. It represented the price of my freedom. I signed it with a steady hand. Mr. Morgan worked on the key encoder. He typed in a series of commands. He took the cards for the deluxe rooms and ran them through the machine, stripping them of their digital access. He did the same for the parents' room. Then, he took the card for the Summit Suite, encoded it, and handed it to me. Here is your key. Ms. Allen, he said, the Summit Suite, top floor. I took the card. It felt warm in my hand. He placed the useless, dead plastic cards into the nice leather folder and closed it. I will hand this to them? He asked. No, I said, I will do it. I took the folder. I turned around. I walked back across the lobby toward my family. They saw me coming and straightened up. Lila wiped her face, composing herself. My father crossed his arms, preparing to scold me for the delay. My mother put on her long-suffering face. They saw the leather folder in my hand. They saw the transaction was done. See? I heard Lila whisper to my mother. I told you, she always caves. She just needed to be dramatic for a minute. I walked up to them. I kept my face perfectly blank. I held out the folder. Here, I said. Lila snatched it from my hand before I could even finish the word. She didn't say thank you. She just ripped it open and started grabbing for the cards. Finally, she huffed. God, Quinn, you took forever. I have lost the best light. Come on. Mom, Dad, let's go. I need you to help me unbox the luggage before we go to dinner. She turned and marched toward the elevators, her heels clicking on the marble. My parents followed her like ducklings. My father threw me a look over his shoulder. Fix your face, Quinn, he muttered. You look miserable. Try to enjoy the vacation you paid for. I watched them go. I watched them walk toward the bank of golden elevator doors. I watched them press the button. I stood there in the middle of the lobby, clutching my single, working key card. I wasn't miserable. I wasn't happy, either. I was just done. I followed them, keeping a distance of 10 paces. I wanted to see it. I needed to see the moment the elevator doors refused to open. I needed to see the moment the world they thought they owned finally said no. I stood at the polished walnut counter, my back to the roaring fire and the family that had just mocked my pain. The air around the reception desk was quieter, shielded from the acoustic chaos of the lobby. It felt like a different world here, a world of contracts, ledgers, and cold, hard transactions. This was my world. I looked at Mr. Morgan. He was waiting, his hands clasped professionally on the desktop, his face a mask of polite neutrality. He had seen the shove. He had seen the humiliation. But he was a hotelier, and his loyalty belonged to the signature on the check. I took a breath and asked the question that had formed in the icy silence of my mind. Mr. Morgan, I said, keeping my voice low and even, I have a question about the terms of my reservation. If I pay for all the rooms right now, the Summit Suite and the 2 Alpine Deluxe rooms, if I settle the bill in full, do I control the access to those rooms? Mr. Morgan blinked, a microscopic crack in his professional veneer. He looked down at the computer screen, then back at me. I continued, my voice hardening into steel. If I pay for them, but I choose to leave 2 of them empty, is that my prerogative? Can I dictate that no other key cards are issued or activated for those rooms, even if there are names listed as accompanying guests? Mr. Morgan did not hesitate for long. He tapped a few keys on his terminal, scrolling through the terms of service. Ms. Allen, he said, his tone dropping to a confidential register. The reservation is entirely in your name. You are the primary financial obligor. The other names, your parents, your sister, are listed merely as occupants. They have no contractual relationship with the Snowfall Crown Resort. If you accept the full financial liability for the booking, you retain the exclusive right to determine who accesses the inventory. He paused, looking at me over the rim of his spectacles. Because we are within the non-refundable window, and given the storm, we cannot resell the rooms anyway. So yes, if you pay for them, they are yours to do with as you please, even if that means keeping them empty. I nodded. It was the answer I wanted. It was the legal confirmation that my plan was not just a burst of spite, but a legitimate exercise of property rights. Mr. Morgan turned the screen slightly so I could see the breakdown. The Summit Suite is $11,400 for the 3 nights, he said, pointing to the first line item. The 2 Alpine Deluxe rooms, combined, come to $16,200. The total, including resort fees and taxes, is $27,600. I stared at the number. $27,600. It was a staggering amount of money. It was a down payment on a house. It was a luxury car. It was more than my father had made in a year when I was a child. For a brief, flickering second, the old Quinn tried to surface. The frugal Quinn, the responsible daughter, the one who would calculate how many hours of coding it took to earn that sum. The old Quinn would have thought it was insane to burn nearly $30,000 just to make a point. But then I felt the phantom pain in my wrist where the watch used to be. I remembered the sound of Lila's laugh. I remembered my mother worrying about the scene instead of my injury. I did the math in my head, but I used a different currency. How much was my dignity worth? How much was 10 years of being a doormat worth? How much was it worth to finally hear the word no come out of my mouth and actually stick? $27,000 was cheap. It was a bargain. It was a clearance sale price for my freedom. I reached into my purse and pulled out the Centurion card. It was heavy, made of black anodized titanium. I held it between 2 fingers. I placed it on the marble counter. Clink. The sound was sharp, definitive. It sounded like a judge's gavel coming down. Charge it all, I said. My voice did not tremble. Charge every cent. But listen to me carefully. I want you to activate only 1 key card. Mine, the one for the Summit Suite. I leaned in closer, my eyes locking with his. For the other 3 cards, the ones for my parents and my sister, I want you to encode them with nothing. I want them to be dead plastic. I want the little light on the door to flash red when they try to use them. Mr. Morgan looked at the card, then at me. He was piecing it together. He was realizing that I was not just sending them away. I was setting a trap. I was letting them walk into the wall of their own entitlement. And the folder? He asked. Do I still give it to them? Yes, I said. Put the dead cards in the nice leather folder. Make it look perfect. Make it look official. I want them to believe they won. I want them to believe that I caved, just like I always do. Let them take the cards. Let them go up to the elevator. Let them drag their luggage all the way to the door. And then? He asked. And then, I said, when they come back down here screaming, when they demand to know why their keys do not work, you tell them to talk to me. You tell them that the primary account holder has restricted access. Mr. Morgan took the black card. He swiped it through the reader. The machine whirred softly, printing out the long, damning receipt. Understood. Ms. Allen, he said. I signed the slip. My signature was a sharp, jagged line. While he was busy encoding the single working key and the 3 dummy cards, I pulled out my phone. I needed to prepare the second half of the execution. The hotel room was the trap, but the money was the oxygen, and I was about to cut off the supply. I opened my banking app. Face ID unlocked it instantly. I navigated to the credit card management tab. There they were, the 3 supplementary cards attached to my account. Elliot Allen, status, active. Marianne Allen, status, active. Lila Allen, status, active. I saw the pending charges from the last 48 hours, the Toomey luggage, the Montclair coats, the cashmere scarf my mother was wearing right now. They had feasted on my credit limit like locusts. My thumb hovered over the lock card toggle for my father. I could do it now. I could shut them down right this second. But no, that was too fast. I wanted them to feel the safety first. I wanted them to get into the elevator, believing that everything was resolved, believing that Quinn had fixed it, believing that the money tap was flowing as freely as it always had. I wanted the shock to be total. I left the cards active for 5 more minutes, just long enough for them to realize they were homeless in a blizzard, but not long enough for them to buy a way out of it. Mr. Morgan finished his work. He slid the leather folder across the counter. Inside were 4 cards. 3 were trash. 1 was power. He slid a separate, single key card toward me. This is yours, Ms. Allen, he said. The Summit Suite. Penthouse level, private access. I picked it up. It was cool to the touch. It felt heavier than a normal key card. It felt like a weapon. Thank you. Mr. Morgan, I said. I turned around. Across the vast expanse of the lobby, near the elevators, my family was waiting. They were huddled around the bell cart, looking impatient. Lila was checking her reflection in the brass railing of the cart. My father was checking his watch, his functional, expensive watch that I had probably paid for indirectly. From this distance, I could read their body language perfectly. The tension had left their shoulders. They saw me at the desk. They saw me sign the receipt, and they relaxed. They were smiling. They were chatting. They had interpreted my walk to the desk not as an act of rebellion, but as an act of submission. Look at her. They were likely thinking, she is sorting it out. She always does. She threw a little tantrum. She fell down. She made a scene. But in the end, she knows her place. She is the fixer. She is the wallet. I could see my mother say something to Lila, and Lila laughed. It wasn't the cruel laugh from before. It was the comfortable, smug laugh of someone who has gotten away with murder. They had no idea. They had no idea that the woman walking back toward them was not the daughter who had boarded the plane in Seattle. That daughter had died on the marble floor when the watch broke. The woman walking toward them was a stranger with a very specific, very cold plan. I walked steadily. My heels clicked on the stone. I held the leather folder in my left hand, the one with the aching wrist. I held my own key in my right pocket, gripping it tight. I was not walking over there to save them. I was walking over there to say goodbye. As I got closer, Lila looked up. She saw the folder in my hand. Her eyes lit up. "Finally!" she called out, her voice echoing slightly. "God. Quinn, what took you so long? I thought you were rewriting the Constitution over there." I did not smile. I did not hurry. I just kept walking until I was standing right in front of them. "Here," I said, extending the folder. I watched Lila grab it. I watched her tear it open. I watched her hand a card to Dad, a card to Mom. I watched them shove the plastic into their pockets without even looking at me. "Let's go," Dad said, gesturing to the bellman. "We are starving. Quinn, did you make the reservation for dinner?" "Yes," I said. It was true. I had made it. I just hadn't told them that I would be the only one eating. We moved toward the elevators. The golden doors reflected our distorted images. A happy family on vacation. A successful daughter treating her parents. A beautiful sister ready for her close-up. It was all a lie. And in about 3 minutes, the truth was going to come crashing down like an avalanche. I pressed the call button. The arrow lit up. "Going up?" Lila said cheerfully. "Yes," I thought, "going up, but only one of us is going to stay there." The elevator bay was lined with brushed gold and mirrored panels, reflecting our distorted figures back at us. We stood there, a tableau of a family on the brink of disintegration, though only one of us knew it. Lila stepped forward first. She held the keycard I had just handed her, the dummy card encoded with absolutely nothing, and tapped it against the sensor panel. A small red light blinked. "Beep, beep." She frowned, tapping it again, harder this time, as if the force of her entitlement could override the circuitry. "Beep, beep, red light." This system is so glitchy," Lila complained, rolling her eyes. She turned to my father. "Dad, try yours. My card is demagnetized or something." My father stepped up, huffing with the impatience of a man who was ready for a drink. He slapped his card against the reader. "Beep, beep, red light." "What is wrong with this place?" he muttered. 5 stars, and they cannot even get the elevators to work. "Marianne, try yours." My mother tried. The result was the same. The red light flashed, a tiny mocking eye in the gold panel. The frustration in the group shifted instantly into a demand for service. And since I was the service provider, 3 heads turned toward me simultaneously. "Quinn," Lila whined, her voice grating. "Go back to the desk and fix this. They gave us bad keys. Tell them who we are. Tell them to hurry up." My father crossed his arms. "Seriously. Quinn, you should have checked these before we walked away. Now we have to wait again. Go handle it." Go handle it. That was the epitaph of my 20s. Go handle it. Go pay for it. Go fix it. I did not move toward the reception desk. Instead, I took 1 step forward, moving past my father. I pulled my single key card from my pocket. I held it up to the black sensor. Beep! A crisp, bright green light illuminated the panel. The heavy golden doors slid open with a smooth, expensive whisper, revealing the plush interior of the elevator cab. I stepped inside. I turned around to face them. They were staring at me, confusion wrinkling their foreheads. They did not understand why I was standing in the car while they were still stuck on the marble floor. "Come on, then," my father said, reaching for his suitcase. "Hold the door." I did not reach for the door open button. My finger hovered over the button for the penthouse floor. "The elevator is not broken," I said. My voice was calm, echoing slightly in the small space, and the system is not glitchy. Lila paused, her hand halfway to her luggage handle. "What are you talking about?" "Only my card is activated," I said. The realization hit them in waves. First confusion, then disbelief, and finally, the dawn of horror. "What?" my mother asked. "But you just paid. We saw you pay." "I did," I replied. "I paid for every single room. I paid the full amount. But I decided that I am the only one staying here." The elevator doors began to slide shut. Panic, sudden and feral, seized them. "Quinn!" my father roared, lunging forward. "Quinn! Stop! Lila screamed, dropping her bag and reaching for the gap between the closing doors. You are joking! This is not funny! I watched the gap narrow. I saw their faces framed in the gold metal, faces twisted with rage and fear. They were not scared of the cold. They were scared because their servant had just cut the strings. I looked my sister in the eye. I have saved you enough for 10 years, I said. My voice was low, but it carried perfectly over the sound of the lobby music. This time, save yourselves. Clunk. The doors sealed shut. The screaming faces vanished. The sound of their shouting was cut off instantly, replaced by the gentle hum of the lift mechanism rising. I was alone. I leaned my head back against the mirrored wall and closed my eyes. I exhaled a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 16 years old. My wrist throbbed, but for the first time, the pain felt like victory. The elevator opened on the top floor. I walked down the silent, carpeted hallway to the summit suite. I tapped my card. Green light. I pushed the door open and stepped into a sanctuary. The room was massive. A cathedral ceiling with exposed beams stretched over a living area that featured a roaring gas fireplace. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the Teton Mountains, which were currently being battered by the blizzard. In the bathroom, I could see the famous stone-soaking tub, the one Lila had sold to a lingerie brand, waiting empty and serene. I didn't take off my coat. I didn't unpack. I walked straight to the leather armchair by the fireplace and sat down. I pulled out my phone. It was time to finish it. I opened the banking app. I navigated to the credit card management screen. I saw the 3 names that had drained my spirit and my bank account for a decade. Elliot Allen, Marianne Allen, Lila Allen. I tapped on my father's name. I selected freeze card. A warning popped up. This will immediately decline all future transactions. Are you sure? I hit confirm. I tapped on my mother's name. Freeze card. Confirm. I tapped on Lila's name. I looked at it for a second longer than the others. I thought about the scarf. I thought about the content trip. I thought about the shove. Freeze card. Confirm. Done. The financial lifeline was severed. Down in the lobby, or perhaps at the front desk, where they were currently screaming at Mr. Morgan, their plastic cards were now just useless scraps of material. They could not book another hotel. They could not buy dinner. They could not even buy a taxi ride to the Motel 6. My phone began to vibrate. It started with a text from Lila. WTF, Quinn? Then a call from Dad. Then a call from Mom. Then Lila again. The phone danced on the leather armrest, buzzing angrily. I watched it for a full minute, letting the notifications pile up. 19 missed calls, 30 texts. Finally, I picked it up. I swiped green on a call from my father. I put it on speaker and set it on the table. I stood up and walked to the window, watching the snow swirl in the darkness. Quinn! My father's voice exploded into the quiet room. You listen to me right now. You get down here and fix this. The manager says the rooms are empty, but we are locked out. He says you instructed this. Are you insane? It is 12 degrees below zero. I waited for him to stop shouting. I did instruct it. I said, How dare you? My mother's voice joined in, shrill and hysterical. After everything we have done for you, you leave your parents on the street? You are a monster. You are an ungrateful, cold-hearted monster. And my career, Lila screamed. Quinn, I have a contract. If I do not shoot in that room, I get sued. You are destroying my life. I listened to them. I listened to the chorus of selfishness. Not one of them asked about my wrist. Not one of them asked why I did it. They were only concerned with their comfort, their money, and their image. Listen to me, I said. I spoke softly, but the steel in my voice silenced them. I have paid $27,000 for these rooms. They are sitting empty. They will stay empty for 3 nights. I paid for them just so you could not have them. There was a stunned silence on the other end. And the credit cards are dead. I continued. I just deactivated them. Do not try to swipe them. They will decline. Quinn, you cannot do this, my father yelled. We have no cash. How are we supposed to get home? That is not my problem. I said, I am resigning from the position of Bank of Allen. Effective immediately. I will not pay your rent next month. I will not pay your insurance. I will not pay for your storage unit. Lila. You bitch, Lila screamed. I will post this. I will tell everyone. I will ruin you. If you post one word, I said, my voice dropping an octave, if you post one story, one video, or one lie about me, I have instructed Mr. Ye Morgan to release the 4K security footage of you assaulting me in the lobby. I will press charges for assault and battery, and I will sue you for the cost of the watch. It is valued at $12,000. Do you have $12,000, Lila? Lila choked. The threat of the video, the unedited truth, shut her down instantly. Quinn, please, my mother sobbed, switching tactics to manipulation. We are your family. We are cold. You are adults, I said. Figure it out. I tapped the red button. The call ended. I went into the settings menu. I selected block caller for all 3 numbers. The room went silent. The only sound was the wind howling outside and the crackle of the gas fire. Hours later, late into the night, I felt a pang of hunger. I realized I hadn't eaten since the pretzel on the plane. I put on my coat, not for warmth, but for armor, and took the elevator down to the lobby. The lobby was quiet now. The pianist was gone. The fire was dying down. I walked to the pantry shop near the reception to buy a bottle of water and a sandwich. As I turned back toward the elevators, I passed the main entrance. I stopped. Through the thick, reinforced glass of the vestibule, I could see the driveway. The blizzard had not let up. Under the yellow glow of the street lamps, I saw 3 figures. They were standing by the curb, huddled together against the biting wind. Their expensive Montclair coats were covered in snow. Their Toomey luggage sat in a wet pile on the slushy pavement. I watched as my father counted a small stack of crumpled bills, probably the emergency cash he kept in his wallet. My mother was arguing with a taxi driver who looked reluctant to take them anywhere in this weather. Lila was sitting on her suitcase, her head in her hands, defeated. They looked small. They looked pathetic. They looked like strangers. I stood there, warm and dry, holding my water bottle. I looked down at my left wrist. I rubbed my thumb over the empty space where the watch used to be. I could still feel the phantom weight of it. I thought about the check I had signed, $27,000 for the rooms, $8,000 for the flights, thousands more for the gear they were wearing. It was nearly $40,000. Most people would say that is too high a price to pay for 3 nights of silence. I looked at my family one last time, shivering, stranded, and finally facing the consequences of their own actions. I whispered to the glass, "It was worth every penny." I turned my back on the window. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and rode up to the penthouse to sleep the first peaceful sleep of my life. I have no regrets. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey to get to that hotel lobby, but I'm glad I finally made the decision to choose myself. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Where are you listening from? And have you ever had to make a tough decision to cut off toxic family members? Please let me know. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and smash that hype button so more people can hear this story. Your support means the world to me. Stay strong, and remember, you always have the right to choose peace.